We have a couple of panels coming your way over the next while, so if there are specific questions that you want to get off your chest, you're going to get an opportunity to do it over the next while. But now we're going to turn our attention to the players' perspective. So please give a big welcome to Ryan Mellon of Tyrone, to Rena Buckley of Cork, and to Seamus Callan of Tipperary. All right, you're all very welcome. Thanks very much for joining us. Three experts in concussion, I think, because am I right in saying at least two of you have had concussions? Seamus, you definitely had one, and you're one of those instances where it didn't actually present until a couple of hours afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. We played Galway here last year in the All-Ireland semi-final, and with 10 minutes to go I got kind of a spear tackle, and I was fine. I was fine after it, fine to play on, and 2 days down the line I just started getting bad headaches, and I suppose I was wondering why was that, and a lack of energy, and we were going back to the club then at that stage, so I was wondering. I went down training with the club on the Wednesday night after, and after 10 minutes, I was just exhausted. So, luckily enough, at the time, our manager with the club was Liam Sheedy. So he was obviously, more well aware than probably a lot of club management teams would be.
Yeah.
On the extent of it. So we handled it right, and took the right precautions. But yeah, it didn't happen for a few days after. So
I'd say that's scary enough, is it? You're like, all is going quite well. I mean, what was the last 10 minutes of the match like? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember the last 10 minutes of the game, but an interesting question about the performance of players in the last 10 minutes. That day I had 3-9 scores at that stage, but in the last 10 minutes I didn't score. I don't think I felt the weight of the ball for the last 10 minutes of the game, so that's probably a proper indication of how performance can be actually affected. So if I was to look back at that stage, there was definitely a change in my body and my mind for the last 10 minutes.
And you didn't actually notice it at the time, and there was no symptoms like immediately afterwards. You weren't vomiting in the dressing room or any of the stuff the textbook stuff that we've been seeing.
Yeah, no, I felt absolutely fine, and to be fair, we've a great doctor with us that he managed it very well afterward. But at the time, I suppose I felt good myself, and I felt definitely able to play on, and so look, it was the performance was affected. Yeah.
And tell us what happens then afterwards. So you go down on Tuesday, you feel a bit tired. You obviously come out of the training after 10 minutes. What's the period of time before you're back feeling actually I'm grand again? Yeah.
So the Tuesday I was just out with a few friends, and they were obviously staying out for all the night or whatever. And 6 o'clock I got tired and I got an awful pain in my head, and I went home to bed, and I suppose not the best thing to do when you're concussed, but I suppose I wasn't aware at the time that I was concussed. So I went to sleep at 8 o'clock and I didn't wake up. I slept solid. I did not, blink an eyelid up until 8 o'clock the next morning, which is very unlike me, So then that was a Tuesday. The Wednesday night came and we had club training, so we were doing a few drills, just hitting tackling bags, and 10 minutes into the session I was just left exhausted. So, it's all the indications were there then, and as I said, we had Liam Sheedy over us, so I was taken to see my doctor, then the Tipperary team doctor, and I took 3 months out.
So, 3 months after that?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
So that was the dialogue at the time now. I suppose there has been advances now, and just speaking earlier on, there has been advances there, I suppose, but we wouldn't have been aware of them. It was rest and take time out. That was the only remedy.
Yeah, I think the whole country is learning this for the first time today, so no surprise really. Rhea, tell us a little about your experience, will you? Because people may be unfamiliar. You have the most All-Ireland medals in the room, I think, of anybody, and it's not even close. But you play hurling, you play camogie, and also you play football. And I'm interested to see which of these two sports you're more likely to get a concussion in. And as a physio, what is your experience?
So I suppose I've only ever suffered one probably proper, well, at the time it was probably undiagnosed concussion when I was in school. So I suppose it was when I was about 16, and I was playing camogie, so I would have had my helmet on and all that, but I think I was soloing with the ball and kind of a high tackle that knocked me back on my head. But I mean, it was a school game. The teacher was with us, who actually happened to be my mother as well, so she was with us. There was nobody else with us. I'm not sure if I can't. I think there's a period of the game I can't remember, but I just remember it was a bit of a laugh coming home on the bus that I woke up on the field and I had no idea what way we were playing, what the score was, and I was a bit irrational, I think, for a while, but it was just kind of laughed off and nothing happened. But obviously that's changed hugely in terms of awareness. But I suppose females are a little bit more vulnerable to concussion, and I suppose over the last couple of years, I suppose as ladies football is getting a little bit more physical, you would see a little bit of concussion creeping into ladies football. There was one this year in the league final. Our captain Ciara O'Sullivan had a concussion, so that was very visible on television, and I think it was handled quite well.
And as a physio, when you're playing, do you notice it now? And are you willing to? Do you find yourself stepping in and saying, "Okay, look, you've got to go"?
Yeah, I would. I was listening to Kevin Moran's talk there, and he mentioned kind of 4 points in his structured exam, and when I was kind of just, thinking about his 4 points he made, the first one was a player's history. So as a player who's been playing with teammates for a number of years, you might actually have a better grasp of player history than the physio that might be with you on the day.
Yeah.
Then there was witnessing the event, and again, as a player, you can often see the event much more clearly than a medic who's on the sideline, whose view might be obstructed by another player or referee. Then the third point he had was exam. Obviously, I wouldn't do that. But the fourth one was monitoring the player. You could be marking somebody. When you're playing, you're constantly, especially as an older player, you might be looking out for the people around you. And you just kind of know when they're off and they're not themselves, So often a player is actually in a prime position to pick up and things like that.
And have you ever had to step in for a teammate or an opponent and say, "Look, I know what I'm talking about here. This person needs to go off"?
Yeah, it would. It certainly would happen at training. Yeah, and it would happen in games as well, where you'd inform the.
And are you
team
popular when you're like, "Okay, you've got to go"? Is it like are people willing to go? Yeah, okay, fine, or.
Yeah, sometimes I suppose when there's no medic at the game, generally managers are grateful, because there is a bit of a fear factor around concussion. So often people are grateful, Then I suppose the other thing that can happen when you're at training and there's no medic there and you're the only person there, is that when a player gets concussed, they get, often the player can get, a bit crass and a bit kind of aggressive, and sometimes, other players just want to do whatever it takes to please the player, and leave them play, and then it just kind of, sometimes it gets a bit tricky, but, I think the more people become aware of, that the player's personality can change slightly once they get concussed, if you can get that point across, as well as then what Seamus was saying, that, your performance, you might be the best player in the field, but when you're concussed, you're not the best player. I think, management can become much easier. Yeah,
it's a compelling argument that you're going to be a weakness for the team, actually, for the last couple of minutes. Ryan, what's your story? You're involved in concussion education at the moment, but I think you did suffer concussion as a player when you were...
I suffered 2 concussions as a player, and listening to the workshops this morning, it was the first time that I realised that both concussions were very different in terms of the symptoms that I felt. The first one, I felt foggy, I was unconscious, but my mood, when it came round again, my mood didn't change. Whereas the second one, I wasn't unconscious, but I was nauseous, I was physically sick afterwards, and I was very, very irritable. So I suppose it makes sense to me that no 2 concussions are the same, and that concussions need to be treated differently.
I know, it's like when you hear it, it's completely obvious, and yet at the same time it's been very standard. Here's a cookie cutter approach that all teams, and I guess that's just a function of the way the education has been going. What's your role in terms of helping to educate people now?
I'm employed by Ulster GAA. My title is Player Welfare and Lifestyle Officer. One of the things that we've tried to do to educate people in terms of concussion is run out the GAA's concussion awareness workshop. It's an hour-long workshop, and it's very much directed at lay people. It's delivered by lay people and directed to lay people, so it's very much at the grassroots level. And really what the course covers is, first of all, just really reaching out to the players, to the parents and to the coaches as to what the worst case scenario or the dangers with concussion are. The next thing then is the signs and symptoms of concussion, and obviously getting the player off the pitch, whether that be in training or a game. And the final thing then is the return to play protocol.
Yeah, it was interesting. The Galway team doctor earlier on was saying that he's going to instigate a baseline testing procedure, and it might be the best way of educating people. It's like you get a baseline test as a 15, 16-year-old, and then that database is there for whatever sport needs it. But it's a conversation that you have with people, and it's an introduction saying at some point in your life you might get concussed. If you do, we have this for you.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we found when we were out, and you talked about a database there, is when you're out at the grassroots, you start to hear the real stories, the real scenarios that happened. I got a phone call from a teacher in a school. He asked me to come in to deliver the workshop because one of his players was concussed playing for his club the night before, came in, didn't tell anybody, went to play in a game for the school the very next day, and he collapsed on the pitch, and nobody knew what was wrong with him. So I think you mentioned databases there. I think that's something that really needs to be looked at, so that if you are concussed in a game, that there is a database there that people can get that information.
Yeah, for sure. Seamus, I've got a question. You scored 3-9 against Galway. There's 60 minutes gone, and it's nip and tuck, and there's a place in the All-Ireland final at stake, and you get a spear tackle, and the doctor comes on and says, you're concussed, off you come. Is that a straightforward conversation with you? Or you're like, yeah, no problems, I've done my bit today? Or are you like, under no circumstances am I leaving this field?
Yeah, look, that's obviously it's a very difficult conversation to have. You know, you train all year to play them the last 10 minutes of that game or whatever, but I suppose like the more educated I'm being on concussion, the more you have to just respect what your doctor tells you. And I suppose when we need to, I suppose, more notified on, you know, the whole panel needs to be at these events, or it needs to be sat down at the start of the year and brought through every part of it, you know. I suppose myself personally, because it happened to me, I probably know a bit more than, I definitely know a lot more than the rest of my panel does about it, you know. But everyone needs to realise that. But at the end of the day, it's a very, very difficult conversation to have, but you just have to respect what your team doctor says at the end of the day, because you have to realise that it's not going to benefit the team, and it's not going to enhance your chance of winning. But look, obviously is very difficult. But as I said earlier on, like, unless you physically have a cast on your leg, or you know you've broken a leg or you've broken something, people kind of think he's fine, I can't see it, what's wrong with him? So you know that perception is out there then as well. So you know, everyone needs it all to be explained, and it needs to be highlighted in that regard.
Yeah, because talking about the NFL earlier on, about how players are now kind of saying, I think I might be injured, whereas previously it would have been under no circumstances, I'm going back out there. We're not quite at that stage yet. It feels like in GAA there's still the players, because you put so much into it, and because the occasions are so big, and because you're not a professional and you won't just have the opportunity to do it again, it's going to be a while maybe before players do self-identify. Yeah,
definitely it will be. And I suppose county players probably have a better chance to be able to do that, but you know, going down to the club scene as well, it has to be something looked at across the board, you know. And I suppose, you know yourself, public perception out there, if I go home and I say, God, I have a little bit of a pain in my head, Asher, play on, you're fine, you know, that's the attitude. And look, if we're being honest, that's the attitude you know, all across Ireland really, and that, like, because the education probably isn't there of the side effects and that. So you know, we are touching on it, I suppose, a good bit more at inter-county stage, but it's definitely something that needs to be looked at the club level.
Yeah. Ryan, when you're out and about and you're talking to schools, what kind of an audience are you finding? Is there a growing awareness, or is there still a huge body of work to be done on that?
Yeah, there certainly is a growing awareness. We get good feedback. Anytime I've been out to deliver it, we're getting good feedback, and I think it's very beneficial. You know, you see the posters and that about there, and there are some very good resources that I think somebody mentioned earlier that should be up in club rooms. An idea, a club that I went to had was that the concussion awareness poster should be actually in the team dugout, so that if something happens and there's not a medical person there, that the coach can consult the actual signs and symptoms on the poster, you know, and that'll help them out. The other thing I was going to say, Seamus talked about it there as well. Part of the feedback that we got was, if you know, it's an idea that if you're managing a team or you're a coach and you're having your initial team meeting at the start of the year, this is something that could be mentioned. You know, the dangers around head injuries, and that the the rule for the team is that if anybody has a suspected concussion, that they're coming off straight away, rather than the situation where somebody gets a concussion and the manager goes to take them off, and it's new to them. They don't know why they're being taken off. If it's an underage game, parents start getting irate about why their child's taken off. So it's just an idea that has worked for some of the clubs that we've been in.
Yeah, for sure. If anybody has any questions, just stick your hands up and we'll get the microphone to you. Rena, the game is getting a bit more physical. You are starting to see more concussions, and obviously, as we've seen, concussion in women's sports the impact seems to be much longer. Is the education as good in women's sport at the moment as it needs to be?
I suppose I suppose that there's always room for improvement. I think the Ladies Football Association have just implemented guidelines on how to deal with concussion, and that was just done this year. So I suppose going forward, we would be hoping that there'd be more and more education, same as with the men's, really.
And does it come up as a topic of conversation? Like, is there a sense amongst your teammates that if somebody does have a head injury, we will do the right thing, or is there still a sense, actually, you know what, we're going to play through it? Because I think Aisling Thompson famously played through it and ends up making a speech in an All-Ireland final, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose, look, I suppose with the Nature Girls, I suppose this year, I was saying Ciara O'Sullivan in the football setup, she did get concussed in the league final, so I suppose it was in the middle of our season, you know, and I think, you know, the feeling among the team was, geez, Ciara, get yourself right, you know. I think she had a lot of difficulty at work, and like there was no pressure whatsoever to come back training. I think the general feel was, you know, get yourself right. You know, that was the general feel among the team, and probably I think maybe females more than males. I'm not sure. Maybe that would be more of the kind of the ethos, but you know, look, it's just something we need to become more aware of, and it probably needs to be put out there that a bit more that girls are more at risk, you know. So. You know, the more we do, the better.
Seamus, I think you're 8 seasons now with the senior inter-county team, is that right? 10 seasons?
Well, I've 9 fully done, so
Okay.
I'll be going into my 10th, yeah.
And is there a difference in terms of the conditioning of the players that you're coming up against? Like, has the game got more physical? It seems like each generation makes it that little bit faster, that the conditioning does improve to the point where the impact and the velocity is that little bit harder. Are you noticing that the hits are getting a bit harder?
I wouldn't agree that the hits are getting harder now. I know that players are a lot more, you know, they have a lot more strength and conditioning work done, and they are more physical. But the speed of the game has improved as well. So there's a lot of avoiding tackles, and you know, like if you look at the All Ireland final this year, there wasn't too many hard hits in that game. You know, it was an open, free game of hurling. So like lads are, you know, they're better conditioned. You know, in 2008 when I started, you know, going to the gym was kind of a, you know, just. You'd only take it or leave it, you know what I mean? And now it's twice a week, you have to get to the gym sessions, you have a strength and conditioning coach at every session. So players are in better shape, they're stronger. But I think, to be fair, you know, if you do get a hit at any stage, you know, you're suspect to concussion or any of these things. But I wouldn't think the game has gone that much more physical. You know, most teams do play a brand of open hurling. From my experience. Yeah,
it's funny though that you guys have got stronger and that there aren't more concussions. Obviously, I guess it's really a function of the fact that there isn't head-to-head contact as often as there might be in other sports. Yeah,
but I suppose people are, you know, getting stronger and they're better able to take hits too, I suppose. And you know, if you compare my own you know, physical state now compared to what it was in 2008. You know, it would be like getting, if I got hit now, or back in 2008, it'd be like getting whiplash, you know, but now I'd probably be able to take the shoulder and bounce on and play on and take a score or whatever. So
that's the benefit of the conditioning, actually. It helps prevent the injuries.
Yeah, exactly. I do think it plays a massive part in being able to take and being able to ship tackles. But, you know, people are definitely stronger, all right, but I don't think it has affected the game too much.
Yeah. Ryan, the evolution of Gaelic football and how the players' conditioning has impacted, is it a fairly similar story, or do you expect to see kind of a few more of those high-impact injuries given the speed at which Gaelic football is being played at the moment?
It's hard. I don't want to get drawn on it. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I suppose, as Seamus said, it works both ways. You know, if your opponent's stronger, yes, that's going to be a factor. But if you're stronger and you have the conditioning done as well, you know, that's going to stand to you. So In answer to your question, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess the other thing about Gaelic football is that it's no longer the six backs against six forwards in their positions. There's definitely room for people being much closer and much more bunched. I don't know if that leads to more collisions or if the collisions are a little bit slower. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. I take your point that at certain times in the game there can be nearly all the players on the pitch inside the 45 or whatever. So you're possibly right, but it's not. As I say, I can't make a prediction on it.
Would you ever have thought about concussion when you were playing, or is this definitely something that's kind of it's the sustained effort over the last decade or so of people talking about it that now it's in players' consciousness?
No, I think it is starting. The awareness is getting out there. Rena made the point that when somebody got concussed years ago, it was nearly like a joke. That the fact that they couldn't remember where they were, or they were talking gibberish or something like that. So it definitely has moved on now, and I think we're really getting smart to the dangers of concussion.
Yeah, obviously we had a bit of a debate earlier on about the use of a concussion sub in the GAA. I'm going to ask you all for your view on that. Rena, haven't heard some of the stuff you've heard today. Do you think it's a good idea?
Personally, probably not. No. I do think if there's suspicion of concussion, probably safer just to sit it out.
Yeah.
I can see both sides of the argument, and both sides they're very passionate. They only want what was best for the players. I suppose the evidence and what we heard here today that the current policy, to me, seems to be the right one, and based on the evidence and what the earlier panel had said in their experience from other sports.
Yeah. Have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that I suppose I wouldn't agree with it. I'd say, look, players getting the right education, getting as much awareness as possible, will understand that the doctor is going to make the right call for the team. So you go with that, just sit it out and do the right precautions.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody any questions? Last call for any questions? No. All right. My thanks to Rena Buckley, to Seamus Callanan, and to Ryan Mellon. Thanks, guys.